Good afternoon, everyone. Let me know if you can hear me. Let me know if you're there with me.
We can hear you. Welcome, welcome. Sorry for the inconveniences.
Not a problem. Really a
All
great
right.
pleasure to be with you today. Okay, well, thank you so much, Obi. Okay for me to start with the presentation? Okay, well, thank you so much, Obi. And thank you, first of all, for inviting me to your event today. As Obi has said, for those of you who've joined us a bit earlier, I have started my career as a teacher. And now I work with teachers. I train teachers with the International Diploma of Education at the University of Buckingham. I am a passionate educator. I like to impart knowledge to other people and to help others. And this is something that we do with the International Diploma. And it's something that I hope I can contribute in a small way at your event today. I want to celebrate all the teachers who are with us today, no matter where you're just from. I think it's a noble pursuit. I think it's probably one of the most important things that we can do as professionals is to help raise the next generation. So that's why I think take a minute today. I know we're always so caught up in the small things that we do every day, but take a minute today with this event to celebrate the fact that you're a teacher, that you're such an important person in every society. Celebrate that, and I'm really glad that you're joining today and taking part in an important event that will help you become a better professional, that you are here to learn some more. Today I hope everyone can hear me. Just give me a thumbs up if you're okay for me to start with today's presentation. Yeah, I will be sharing my screen with. I hope you can hear me and see my screen. Let me know, Obi, if you can see my screen. I hope that's the case. Right. Obi, give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen, if everything's okay. I can see that on the screen. All right, so I'll just get started with today's presentation. I hope you can hear me. Just give me a thumbs up if the connection ever breaks or if you have any challenges. And today I'll be sharing something that's very close to me, to my heart. As I've said, I've started my career as a teacher. Actually, I was an English and history teacher. And as an English teacher, I've discovered how important literacy is. It is probably, if you ask me, the most important thing that any educational system can instill in its students, because literacy is really the foundation of any educational system, because it is mastering this skill will enable you to decode not just the curriculum, other subjects, math, science, history, civic education, any other subject depends on good literacy knowledge. But not just that, it will decode the world. It will help you participate in society. It will help you read medication prescriptions. It will help you read legal documents, get around the world. It makes a huge difference, and it enables us to become productive and successful adults, to participate in society. Literacy is, if you want, the door to everything else in life. It is the cornerstone of everything that we can achieve. And if there's anything that any educator should aspire to achieve in their classrooms, is to have literate pupils. Yeah, so it is a gateway that opens many, many doors, and it's something that we want to get right. And this is something that I've discovered as an English teacher. And one of the things that I've tried to do as a teacher was to help my students become independent readers. Yeah, so that they have a text in front of them and they can read it independently, relate to it, and take all the knowledge in the text. And that's really, really important. So this is something that I'll be presenting today in today's training. I want to look at how we can model supported practice to help learners become independent readers, so that we model behavior. What is it? How should we model good reading behavior? How should a child read independently and again get all that knowledge from the text, make the most of what they're reading? So we'll look at some reading comprehension strategies to help pupils become good readers, whether that is reading texts at school, so that's in the textbooks, whether that's reading fiction, so novels, whatever it is, we need to instill good reading behavior in our pupils. But I have to say, for children to be good readers, first of all, they need to be fluent in reading. Yeah, they need to have good reading comprehension, and then to build on for them to become good readers. So the first thing we need to do is to make sure that we always assess our pupils' literacy levels. So whether we're a math teacher, whether we're a science teacher or an English teacher, we always need at every level to assess their literacy level. There are a number of tests you can look at online to do that. There are tests that you probably have in your schools, but always be very aware of how well your pupils read and understand the text. Yeah, so that's something that I would say is just a good strategy for teachers to adopt, no matter what they teach. Make a huge difference. As I said, it is a gateway to access the curriculum. It is a gateway to be to access a lot of spheres of our daily lives, become successful adults. Yeah, so let's go back to how should we model good reading behavior. And I have for you 5 reading comprehension strategies to help your pupils read on their own, independently and successfully. So let's take a look. We have activating prior knowledge. As we know, children come to school and they come equipped with some knowledge. Yeah, they already have some knowledge of the world. They also, when they come to our class, they already know something previously. So we always need to make connections between what they bring to the class and what we teach, because that will help make the read if they start with something that they already know. So the first thing that we do good reading behavior is to activate prior knowledge, what children know before they come to class. We'll look at predicting. So when we see the title of a text, or maybe there's an image associated with a text, or we see the cover of a book, we can start predicting what the story is going to be about. So we want to teach our pupils to start predicting, even before they start reading, what they're going to be reading about. Number 3, we want to look at clarifying, making sure that when we read a text, we ask questions about it and we clarify everything that is unclear, whether that is unknown words, whether that's different phrasing, or it could be cultural aspects. So if you're reading a text about the UK, you want your pupils to ask questions about the 4 seasons. So they don't just read about the 4 seasons, they ask clarifying questions to understand that different cultural aspect, or in this case, environmental aspect that is specific to the UK and they might not know. Number 4, you want them to ask questions about a text, questioning, relate to it. So you want to spark curiosity, in other words. You're reading something and you don't just, remember and memorize it. No, you want to be curious about it, to ask questions. If it's something about characters, why are the characters behaving in that way? What do you think is going to happen next? So we'll look at some examples of different types of questionings, but ultimately you want your pupils to be curious about what they're reading. And also you want them to be able to summarize and share the knowledge they're reading about with other people. So these are the 5 strategies we'll look at today. We'll have an example, so I'll take you through how you can do this with your pupils. But the key thing is that we model these to our pupils So first of all, we show them how to do that. We practice it with them, and then they become independent readers. But we have to show it to them first. We have to model it to them first for them to then take and build these habits. I've shared this training in a different context, and someone has asked me, how long does it take? Well, it is quite a lengthy process, and it is one that takes, it really depends, first of all, on the literacy level of your pupils, the starting point. If they're already fluent readers, if they read with prosody, without hesitation, so if they have good reading skills, it can take, I would say, a few months. But if you have some gaps, that could take longer. So it really, really depends on the starting point of your pupils. It really depends if you're teaching English or other subjects. You might have to work with other teachers. So it does take a while for you to get to your pupils becoming independent readers. But you can see here that you have the student in a darker shade of orange, and then the teacher in a lighter yellowish shade. And you can see that as we start with activating prior knowledge, the student effort here you see is very limited. So the teacher does a lot of the work. You see here that the teacher bar is much bigger. So the teacher does a lot of the work, a lot of the modeling, activating prior. So if we read a text about voting or democracy, we do a lot of the asking, have you seen your parents going to the voting polls? We start asking, have we had an election this year? So we do all this questioning and we activate prior knowledge. We do all the questions and the pupils answer. So their effort is very small. This is when we start modeling. Then we teach the strategy explicitly to them. We tell them there are 5 strategies that you need to do. Then we model them with them. So we say, let's do activating prior knowledge, let's do clarifying questions, let's do all of these. We do it with them. And you can see again, when we model it for them, when we tell them the 5 strategies, the effort the student puts is very limited. The teacher, as they memorize the 5 strategies, as practiced and we guide them, we slowly reduce the time we input, and then the pupils will have more work to do. So we slowly help them become independent readers by reducing our work and increasing the work that they do. Yeah, and then again, this does take a while. It really depends, as I said earlier, on the literacy level of the pupils, on the subjects we teach, on the context, the time we have available. I also know that we have 1,000 things as teachers to do, right? We have the syllabus, then we have parents, we have a lot of other admin work we do it. So I know it's not easy. And this is why I can't really say this is how long it's going to take you. It really, really depends. But I think the bottom line is that when we start, we do a lot of the modeling, we do a lot of guided practice, we help them memorize the strategy, practice the strategy, and as they become more confident and they practice these strategies more and more, they become more independent and they can do it on their own without us having to guide them. That is the goal. So we want to get to number 7, where they do a structured reflection, when they do it on their own. Some students might want to add things, reduce some of the strategies. As soon as they become more independent, they can improvise on the 5 strategies. So let's take a look at each one of the 5 strategies, how we can do it, and then we'll look at an example in practice. So number 1, activate prior knowledge. As I said, this is, we try to connect students with what they know previously, what they put in the classroom, from outside of the classroom or from other sites, other classes. So for example, we can tell them, when you start reading a question, try to connect what you're reading now with what you know from before. So we can tell them, think about, what do you know about the setting of this story? So if you have a picture of a lake, you can ask them, what do you know about the story? Have you ever read a similar story about a lake, and so on. We can also use, what have we learned about this in our science topic? So we can make connections with other topics. If we're teaching something in, for example, in English that has a scientific, let's say, theme, then we can connect the two. And then we can ask, can you link the texts we've read? So maybe if you read different historical texts, we get connections between them. If it's something about a conflict, we can link it to another conflict, and so on. Or we can say, oh, that's right, you learned about this in year 3. Before we start reading, what do you remember? So these are some questions that we can tell our pupils before they start reading a text. They should ask themselves. But as I've said earlier, we start by modeling these type of questions with them first. So every time we read a text with our pupils in class, we say, okay, so before we read, let's try to activate prior knowledge. And we tell them the questions first. And then let's say next time we only need 2 questions. Say in a few weeks, we tell them, oh, so who can tell me what kind of questions can ask to activate prior knowledge? And then the pupils, after having practiced these questions over and over, they will create their own questions. Yeah, so we have to model this for them first. We have to give them examples of the type of questions they ask to activate prior knowledge. And then we slowly reduce the questions, we reduce the support so they can do it independently. And then a child, when they read independently at home or in whatever context in class, they will ask themselves these questions without us having to model it for them. So that's number 1. Number 2, predicting. So what kind of questions do we model for our students when we try to predict? What do the title and front cover tell me about the book and what to expect? So you see your book, novel, you took it from the library, or it could be text, an image of a title. If the title is a sad story, we can ask them, what do you think is going to happen in the story? Obviously, someone hurt someone else or something sad happens, because that's why we call it a sad story. So they can start predicting and they know what to expect. And that, especially if they struggle with literacy, being able to activate prior knowledge and predicting can help them make educated guesses. So if you're reading a new text and you have already some knowledge about what you are going to read, it helps you put the pieces together more easily. So this is why it's so important to do the 2 steps first. Activating prior knowledge and predicting, because it gives them some ground they can build on, so it's not completely from scratch. What other questions? Is the author leaving me about what might happen next? So as you're reading a fiction, there will be hints. Or if you're reading a scientific or science text, there will be different, it could tell you this process has 5 steps, so I know that I have to find 5 things. If I'm reading the text and I'm not understanding and I only found 3 steps, then there's definitely a problem, because I was expecting to find 5. So I go back and reread, right? So are there any hints? Can I find and use the hints and clues to make my predictions? Oh no, I didn't expect that to happen. Can I squeeze more evidence from what I've read to make new predictions? So these are examples of questions we can tell pupils to ask themselves when they're trying to predict what happens next. Just like with step number 1, first of all, we with them, then we only share 2, and then let's say again after a few weeks we can ask our pupils, what kind of questions can we ask to predict what's going to happen next? And then pupils, as independent learners, have to come up with the questions themselves, but we have to model this first. Number 3, clarifying. So again, as I've said, when we're reading something, we have to be clear about what we're reading and have to make sure that there are no unknown words, phrases, cultural aspects, hints that we're not understanding. Or we can say, if you get lost, look for the word or the phrases you're unsure of. This is something I do very often with my students. When I give them a text, I try to guess. Of course, you need to know your what words you know, and I have to highlight them, and then we discuss all the unknown words together. Or sometimes I ask them to use a dictionary if we want to practice that, but usually I ask them not to skip words, because this is something that pupils will always do, right? They will skip words. And so I ask them to look for the phrases they're unsure of, highlight them, and then we discuss them. Also, I tell them it helps to go back and reread if you're not quite sure what's happening or why. Very simple. Again, make sure that you're clear about what you're reading, or let's annotate any words or phrases you're unsure of in the text. This is something that students will start doing as they're reading, highlighting words, phrases, rereading sentences, and something that we want them to do as step number 3 after they start reading. Step number 4, questioning, right? The comprehension is when you start getting curious about what you're reading, engaging with the text. So we can say, keep a note of the questions you have as we're reading. I'm recording mine on the whiteboard. So I'm reading a text and I'm wondering why, for example, if it's fiction, why a certain character behaved in a certain way, or why that happened, or what might happen next. What else? Why? Where is the story set? What do I know about the country, about the time? For example, if I'm reading a story about the UK, the text might not tell you everything about the UK, but it might make you curious about the UK. So you have more questions about the country, about the time, about what it is. Or why did the author choose that word? Sometimes authors, particularly again when you're reading fiction, might use certain words to show that someone is part of a group, yeah, like an insider word, and that could show their belonging to a certain group, or if someone switches between 2 languages, whatever it is. So you can, authors, particularly of fiction, will leave a lot of hints, and that can make you curious. Why did the author say that? Or why did that happen? Or I wonder if. So again, questioning, once you've predicted what's going to happen, you've activated prior knowledge, you've clarified everything that was unclear, you start, you have a good understanding, technical understanding of what you're reading, of the information that is shared. You start asking, wondering why things happen. If it's something, if it's scientific, then again, you ask more questions. Why does that happen? And you can, build on why, but why does that happen? Or why does that happen? So again, you want to instill this questioning, curiosity to understand more and build and stretch that understanding from the text. Number 5, summarizing. So once you've read, you've understood, you've asked further questions, you want to help them summarize. So we can ask them to really enjoy this text. It's important to take a summary away after each chapter. This is something that I used to ask my students to do in their reading log. After every chapter, they put a few short sentences to summarize what they've read. And this is often a very powerful indicator on how well they understand the text. Because, for example, if a student will only highlight a few details, not capture the essence of a chapter, that's the most, I would say, indicator that they've not understood. So a student who understands what they're reading, they have the ability to summarize it in a few short sentences. If they cannot do that, it's very likely that they misunderstood what they've read, or they weren't paying attention, or it could be multiple reasons, but they really didn't understand. Or it could be 5 keywords, a quick picture with some annotations. You can adapt that according to different ages or different subjects. Or you can have a post-it note summary that can help you take our stories home. You can be very creative with how you want your students to summarize the text, but it's really, really important that they have that ability to do that. And that could show you, as a form of assessment at the end, that they have understood what they're reading. So these 5 strategies, we've looked at examples of how we can model these with our pupils, excuse me, and then we slowly reduce our support, as you remember the diagram, and they do this independently. So let's look at let's practice an example together. I have a short text here. I'm going to read it with you just in case you cannot see the text. It is about a cinema complaint. Dear Miss Trout, thank you for your letter concerning your visit to our cinema on May 3rd. I am sorry to hear that you are unhappy with the treatment you received, and I'm disappointed that you will dissuade others from the future. In response to your specific questions, number 1, yes, you are expected to pay the price cost ticket as you are clearly an adult. Although you pointed out you were wearing a miniskirt and liked Little Mix, your face and lack of legally recognized ID say otherwise. Number 2, no. If you are refused entry to the cinema, you are not entitled to free sweets. Number 3, Sandra is a very pleasant, well-trained and experienced member of staff who denies calling you such a derogatory term. Witnesses to the scene confirmed that she was most restrained throughout. You will be hearing from our solicitors as we are claiming compensation for the damage caused to our popcorn machine. The fire service will be contacting you separately about the appalling behavior and language you used when they caught you free. Yours sincerely, Miss Warner. So we have a very short text about, we'll look at that, about cinema complaint. Very, very short. It'll be a similar text that our children have in their English texts, could be in an exam. Yeah, so we want to make sure that our students can read this on their own and understand the text fully. So let's apply the 5 strategies to this short text. Let's imagine that I'm modeling these strategies to our pupils. How would I do that? First of all, of course, I share the text, and then I say we'll do the 5 strategies, and I'll teach you how to do each of them for this text. Number 1, how do I activate prior knowledge about a short text about cinema? So I've asked them very simply, have you ever been to the cinema? What did you do at the cinema? So I'm interested about the behavior of someone at the cinema, and then let's imagine that I'm a child reading this text. If I've never been to the cinema, I'm going to struggle to understand what's happening here because I cannot visualize a popcorn machine. I don't understand what free sweets. So there will be a lot of cues here if I've never been to a cinema that I would struggle to understand because this text does not spell out everything. So I need to have some understanding of a cinema before I can actually read between the lines and understand everything that this person is saying in this letter. Yeah. So if someone says, if they've never been to a cinema, I start explaining, you have screens in different rooms, and then you have a popcorn machine, and then you can buy sweets. So I'll start in what the cinema experience. Tell them what normally to the cinema, or what film did you see? Who did you go with? Did you enjoy your time there? Why? Yeah, so I start asking some questions, and I can tell them next time you're reading a text, try to connect it with what you already know. So activate prior knowledge. I share these questions with them first, and then I tell them next time when I'm not with you, try to do the same and ask similar questions. So let's go back to the text. We've done activating prior knowledge. The second thing was, yeah, you can see here, cinema complaint, dear Miss Trout, yours sincerely. We try to predict what's going to happen. So what will the letter about? Who is Mr. Wall likely to? What about Trout? We don't really, we don't have a lot of background to this letter. We know it's a letter because it has the address, dear, yours sincerely. We know it's a letter. We know it's about someone complaining about something because of the title, but they don't really tell us in the text. And this is something that happens when we read a lot of text. You don't have the full context. And so you have to predict, you have to make some guesses, or sometimes you have to read the whole thing before everything is explained. But we have to guess who is. So Miss Trout is probably the person making the complaint, and Mr. Warner is probably the person responding to the complaint. So that's my prediction by looking before I start reading. Yeah, so practice questions. Let's look at the text again and go to, we've activated prior knowledge. I made sure that my pupils know what going to the cinema is like, what good behavior looks like at cinema, because this is also a complaint about bad behavior at the cinema. So you need to be able to compare. If this is bad behavior, what does good behavior look like? So we have that conversation about activating prior knowledge. We try to predict what's going to happen, who's complaining, who's the person responding, why are people, we try to guess. I can ask them, why do you think people are complaining when they go to the cinema, and so on. So we do the prediction. Then we do the clarifying. I want to make sure that my pupils, when they look at the text, they know and understand everything they're reading. So I can ask any words or phrases you're unsure of in the text, and ask them what is suede. I know that that's a more advanced word, and my pupils probably haven't seen it before, so I ask them to highlight. Full price. Yeah, so these are the 2 words that I want them to look at these words because they're very important to the letter. Dissuade, yeah. it's really important that we understand this word. Otherwise, I don't really understand what the letter is saying about Miss Trout is trying to do. What is she trying to do? Dissuade others from visiting in the future. So this is something she's threatening the cinema staff that she'll do. So I need to understand what she's talking about. Also, there seems to be a disagreement about full price. So it's really important, again, that I make sure these important words, my pupils understand them. Also, this is a text from the UK, and it makes references to pop culture, mini Little Mix, which is a famous girl band in the UK. We might want to discuss that to make sure that we clarify all these cultural aspects that might be different, the fire service, so a few small words here that I want to clarify with them, again, to make sure that they have full clarity of what they're reading. So again, we've activated prior knowledge, we've tried to predict what's going to happen, we've clarified all the words and cultural aspects. Then we move on to, again, as I've said, my favorite part, which is the questioning. And I can ask them from lines 3 to 4, what can you infer Miss Strout is going to do? And also, I'm sorry to hear you're unhappy with the treatment you received, and I'm disappointed that you will dissuade others from visiting in the future. So again, as I've said, this is an important piece of information that we get in the text, and we might ask them to think about this. Or, what has Sandra been accused of in line 10? So you can see we have these two questions. So we start asking questions from the text. We're curious to understand more. We're curious to get deep down into this full experience to understand exactly what happened. So we ask these questions, and we have Sandra. What is she being accused of? What does it say here in line 10? That she denies calling you such a derogatory term. So I think Ms. Trout is accusing Sandra of calling her by a derogatory term. And she denies this has happened. Right, so we've read the text, now it's time to summarize the information. So I can ask my pupils to really enjoy this text. It's important to take a summary away after each chapter. Sorry, this is something, 5 key words. So we can ask the pupils to summarize this in a sentence. Because this is a short text, I can ask my pupils, can you please summarize this in a short sentence? And then that will tell me if they understood this or not. If they give you a short summary and they say something like, oh, there was a girl who was wearing a mini skirt and she liked Little Mix. Now, this is a very small detail in the text, and it would tell me that they've only understood a few words, but they're not really getting the full essence, the full understanding of the text. A good sign could be Miss Trout made a complaint to the cinema, but her claims were unfounded. Yeah, and the cinema is responding to her claim, saying that her reasons were unfounded and that a solicitor will contact her about the damage. So the key message of the cinema complaint. These are the 5 strategies. I don't take, these are not my own strategy. I didn't come up with them. I have to say, this is really important. This comes from a source that I have a lot of respect for, and from the Education Endowment Foundation in the UK. They have a guidance report called Improving Literacy Stage 2. So some of the recommendations that I've shared with you today are for pupils between 7 and 11-year-olds. And they tell you more about these strategies, how you can use them in your classroom, how you can build on them. They have more examples. I highly, highly encourage you to check this resource and read more, because as I've said at the beginning of my presentation, literacy is the cornerstone, is the foundational skill that we have to make sure our pupils get, because it opens the door to the rest of the curriculum and to a successful and productive adult life. So it's really important that we make sure they have good literacy and that we build on that literacy so they can achieve in other subjects. Yeah, so absolutely, no matter what subject you're teaching, I do encourage you to consider check this resource so you can help your pupils achieve and thrive. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I have to say, to close my presentation, again, that at the International Diploma in Education at the University of Buckingham. We celebrate teachers, and I want to again celebrate you today. And I hope that you have a really good time at the conference. I want to say a huge thank you to Obi Goodness, who is actually a mentor with our program, and she's been one of our best students and an inspirational mentor. I want to thank her for all the good work that she's doing, for organizing this event, and for having me to share some of my strategies as a teacher and some of my learning in terms of literacy. Thank you so much, Obi. And all the best to everyone. Over to you, Obi.